Hi golfers, Nick here from GOLFTEC Singapore. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week on golf tips, we're going to talk about the lead wrist position and its relationship with the club face. So the lead wrist from this angle could be flat, it could be flexed or bowed, or it could be extended, otherwise known as cupped. So today we're going to talk about how this lead wrist position affects the club face. So in today's video, I'm going to hit two shots. I'm going to hit one where I flex the wrist, and one where I extend the wrist. See what happens to the ball flight, see what happens to the club data, see what happens to that club face. So before we do that, if you take a look at the camera from down the line, so if I make a swing and I keep my wrist flat, you can see where the club face is. Now if I was to flex my wrist, you can see how the club face starts to close. So I'm sort of pointing the lobe on my glove here at this back camera as I'm doing it. So flat, bowed, you can see how that changes the club face. Now if I was to go extended, cup the wrist this way, see how that now opens the club face. So just by moving this wrist into a different place, it dramatically affects the club face relationship to the swing path. So for today's video, I'm going to hit two shots. One where I try and deliberately cup my wrist, keep it cupped in the swing. One where I try and bow it a little bit more, see what happens to the ball flight. I think this is quite a key point here because a lot of golfers, especially golfers that struggle to draw the golf ball, they believe just swinging on an inside path will create a draw. But there's also the club face relationship with that path that's so important. So for the first shot, I'm going to try and cup my lead wrist, try and open this face, but still keep my swing path in, see what happens to the ball flight. Okay, so you see how that pushes out to the right. So it's a bit of a push fade, that one. Let's take a look at the shot data in a bit more detail. So taking a look at the data on the screen here quickly. So for that last shot, and this is the key point here, I did manage to swing the path from the inside, so 3.7 degrees into out path. Obviously the most important factor there is the face was open to that path. So that's why that ball started to the right and it faded off. So it was a push fade. Roughly 3 degrees open to the swing path, which is why that ball stayed out to the right. Other key points there, quite interesting, it was reasonably close to the middle in terms of the ball strike, but the launch angle was really high, 24.6 degrees with a 7-iron, that's about 6 or 7 degrees higher than it should be. So it'd be interesting to see what happens when we test this theory, when I try and bow my wrist, see what the difference is between these two shots. So we're going to test out a theory of bowing the wrist, trying to flex the wrist this way, try and almost point this glove at this back camera, see what happens to the ball flight. Now I'm going to try and swing this on a similar sort of path, sort of just a few degrees from the inside, but just see with this different wrist position how the club face gets affected. Okay, so you can see that ball there started just left of the line, a little bit further. It's been interesting to see this club data. So taking a look at the data there for the bowed wrist position, club head speed very similar, swing path I think is quite similar as well, but very big difference in the club face angle. So now the club face is actually 9 degrees closed to the path instead of being 3 or 4 degrees open. The ball actually launched at 14 degrees, so it's about 10 degrees less than the extended wrist position. The loft was less as well. The strike was a little bit out of the toe actually, but interestingly enough, even though it's slightly out of the toe, the efficiency or the smash factor I think was a little bit higher, so, and the ball carried a little bit further as well. So we're going to sit down now and take a look at those two shots in a bit more detail and take a look at my golf swing. Before we take a look at the video, I'm just going to go through this data quickly. So I've labelled the red one, which is the one where I extended my lead wrist. I've labelled that as a cupped wrist to make it simple, and the one where I flexed my lead wrist, I labelled that as bowed. So you can see red is cupped, blue is bowed. Now taking a look at, first of all, you can see the ball flight on the screen, a lot higher when we look at the side view with the cupped wrist, and then you can see the top view, you can see the differences in the ball flight in relationship to the straight line there. Now taking a look at the data, the ball speed was 5 miles an hour faster when I bowed my wrist, and it launched 10 degrees less. There was also a lot less backspin. The side angle minus means the ball started to the left, side angle positive means it started to the right. So with the cup wrist the ball started to the right and curve right, and with the bowed wrist it started to the left and curve left, and then obviously differences there in the distance as well. So about 6 yards extra carry when I bowed my wrist, and about 11 yards total distance. Let's take a look at the club data now. So the club data I've just put on the screen here is, you can see the pictures at the top here. So the bowed wrist has got less loft compared to the cup wrist. You can see the side view there. Take a look at the top view for the face angle. See a big difference. So the white line is square, so the blue one is closed and the red one is open. Interesting point there, the club path is virtually the same, with like 0.1 difference. So even though we saw the differences there in the ball flight, the swing path was basically the same. And this is the whole point of the video, to explain that to draw a golf ball, it's not just about swinging from the inside. You've got to match that club face up to the swing path. The contact was actually a little bit better when I cupped my wrist, for whatever reason, a bit more at the toe when I bowed it, which I thought was quite interesting, because the ball speed was faster when I bowed my wrist, and it wasn't because of the strike, it was because of the loft that I presented at impact. So when you take a look at the dynamic loft here, it was about 14 degrees more loft at impact when I cupped my wrist. And then obviously as a result of that, the efficiency or the smash factor was slightly higher when I bowed my lead wrist. Another interesting point there would be the club head speed is basically the same, yet we saw a difference in distance. Club face angle, just to point that out, is 6.6 degrees open when I cupped my wrist, and minus 5.6, so 5.6 degrees closed when I bowed my wrist. Club path virtually the same. Slightly differences in the angle of attack as well, so slightly shallower when I cupped it and slightly steeper when I bowed my wrist. Now let's take a look at the video now. So on the screen here I've just put red and blue arrow just to represent sort of the ball flight. So when I extended and cut my wrist, the ball flight in red pushed fade, and then in blue it was more of a pull draw. So just to leave that on there, just to give you guys a bit of an idea of which is which. So as I swing back, you can see the difference here in the club face angle. So when I sort of felt like my wrist was more bowed on the right hand picture here, you can see if I put a line on the club face angle, you can see the difference between where red and blue is. So you can see how the blue one is pointing more to the sky, and the red one is more like a 45-degree angle, so a little bit more open than the blue. Let's have a look as I swing down. So we're going to take it down to left arm parallel position, and again, if you look at the club face here in blue, you can visibly see the loft, where as soon as you look at the red hand picture, you can't really see the face angle at this point. So you can see how the relationship between my wrist is affecting the club face. If you were to look at the right hand picture, so where my hands are, you'd probably see a slightly more of my glove at this point. So it's just showing you how that's closing the club face more to the swing path. We keep this going to shaft parallel. Again, you can see it's not perfect frame this, but just you can see the face angle here in blue compared to the red. So we know in the red that face came in more open to the path, and in blue it came in close to the path. So you can see the sort of the differences there. Now if we just go back a frame just to have a look at the club face again, so I put it in red and then in blue, and then I think this is a good one to view the sort of the wrist position as well. If I just take away all these lines, so on the right here we have the bowed wrist, and then on the left here we have the sort of the cup wrist. So you can just see how that affects the club face. So on the right here I'm just bowing that one more down, that keeps the club face closed, and as we know that's the one which sort of pull drew on the right hand side. So you can see how the way you move your wrist has a massive bearing on how you control the club face. So if you're more like this golfer on the left that struggles to draw the golf ball, what you want to try and feel is that when you make that backswing, you feel like that lead wrist is pointing back towards you, behind you. That's going to just change the club face relationship. So you've got a couple of key points here, or checkpoints to look for at the top of the backswing, when the left arm is parallel and when the shaft is parallel. Now in an ideal world you would want to try and keep that wrist as flat as possible to hit the ball roughly as straight as possible. I wanted to go to the two extremes there, so I tried to exaggerate one wrist position when I sort of flexed it and bowed it, and the other one I tried to extend it and cup it and see what the difference was in the ball flight, just to give you two ends of the spectrum. And like I say, ideally you want to be probably somewhere in between, try and get that club face slightly close to the path but not overdo it like I did there in the blue one. So golfers, if you've got any questions on that, post them in the box below. If you don't already, please follow me on my other social media platforms, and we'll see you again next week for another video on golf tips.